The last thing I expected to find when I came home early from my business trip was my husband's car missing from our driveway, and his boss Victoria sitting in my living room, crying into her hands with mascara streaking down her cheeks. But there she was, looking as shocked to see me as I was to see her, and the words that came out of her mouth next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. "Jessica, thank God you're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I think we've both been played. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." My name is Jessica Martinez, and until 3 days ago, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. At 32, I was the marketing director at TechFlow Solutions here in Austin, Texas, managing campaigns for tech startups while building my own food blog on the side. Marcus and I had been married for 4 years, living in our dream house in Riverside Heights with its wraparound porch and view of the hill country. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, and I genuinely believed we were happy. I should probably start from the beginning because the signs were there if I'd been paying attention. But when you trust someone completely, when you share a bed and a mortgage and dreams about the future, it's easy to explain away the little inconsistencies that might otherwise raise red flags. Marcus worked as a regional sales manager for a tech consulting firm, and over the past 6 months, his travel schedule had become increasingly demanding. At least, that's what he told me. Late nights at the office became overnight trips to Dallas, weekend conferences in San Antonio, emergency client meetings that required him to leave town with barely any notice. Each time, he'd apologize profusely, promise to make it up to me, and return home with expensive gifts that I now realize he probably couldn't afford on his salary. The morning this all started, I was supposed to be in Houston for a 3-day marketing conference. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, not just for the professional development, but honestly, for a little time to myself. Marcus had been so stressed lately, so distracted, that our conversations had become these surface-level exchanges about groceries and utility bills. I missed the man who used to laugh at my terrible cooking attempts and stay up late discussing business ideas for my food blog. But the conference got canceled at the last minute due to a scheduling conflict with the keynote speaker. I was already packed, already mentally prepared to be away, so I decided to surprise Marcus by coming home early and maybe planning a romantic evening together. We hadn't had one of those in months. The 2-hour drive from Houston back to Austin gave me time to think about our relationship, about the distance that had grown between us without either of us really acknowledging it. I found myself making mental notes about things we needed to discuss, ways we could reconnect. Maybe we needed a vacation together, just the two of us. Maybe we needed to set better boundaries around work and travel. I was actually feeling optimistic by the time I pulled into our neighborhood. That optimism evaporated the moment I turned onto our street and saw that Marcus's silver BMW wasn't in its usual spot in our driveway. It was Thursday afternoon, and he'd told me he was working from home all day, catching up on paperwork and client calls. His car should have been there. I parked in the garage and entered through the kitchen, calling out his name. The house felt different somehow, though I couldn't immediately put my finger on why. It was too quiet, but not just empty quiet. It was the kind of silence that follows raised voices, the way a room feels after an argument, even when no one's there anymore. That's when I heard the soft crying coming from our living room. I dropped my overnight bag and moved cautiously toward the sound, my heart starting to race. Was someone hurt? Had there been an accident? But when I rounded the corner and saw Victoria Chen, Marcus's boss and the CEO of his consulting firm, sitting on our cream-colored sofa with tears streaming down her face, my first thought wasn't concern. It was confusion. Victoria was always put together, always in control. I'd met her at several company events over the years, and she struck me as the kind of woman who probably scheduled her emotional breakdowns for maximum efficiency. Seeing her disheveled, her usually perfect black hair falling loose from its bun, Her designer blazer wrinkled, was like seeing a carefully constructed facade crack open. "Victoria?" I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "What are you doing here? Where's Marcus?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I saw something there that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just sadness. It was shame and fear. "Jessica," she said, standing quickly and smoothing down her skirt with shaking hands, "I didn't know you were coming back today. Marcus said you'd be gone until Saturday." "The conference was canceled," I replied automatically, still trying to process the scene in front of me. "Victoria, you're scaring me. Where is my husband? Why are you in my house? And why are you crying?" She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, wrapping her arms around herself. For a moment, she looked like she might bolt for the door, but then something in her expression shifted. A decision was made. "I need to show you something," she said quietly. "But first, you should sit down." I remained standing, every instinct telling me I didn't want to hear whatever she was about to say. "Just tell me where Marcus is." "He's gone, Jessica. His apartment is cleaned out. His office is empty. He submitted his resignation through email this morning, effective immediately." Her voice was steady now, businesslike, as if delivering this news to me was just another unpleasant task she needed to complete. The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. This is his home. This is our home. He wouldn't just leave without saying anything. There has to be an explanation." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling through what looked like a long conversation thread. "I thought the same thing when I got his resignation email. So I came here to talk to him, to find out what was going on." The door was unlocked. I called his name, but no one answered. That's when I found this. She handed me her phone, and I found myself staring at a text conversation between Victoria and Marcus. But these weren't professional messages about work, projects, or client meetings. These were intimate, personal exchanges that made my chest tighten with a sick realization. The messages went back months. Victoria telling Marcus how much she missed him after their business trips together. Marcus responding with promises about their future, about how soon they'd be free to be together openly. Victoria expressing concern about me, about the guilt she felt, and Marcus reassuring her that I was clueless and that everything was going according to plan. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through message after message, each one feeling like a knife being twisted deeper into my chest. There were photos, too. Marcus and Victoria together in hotel rooms, at restaurants I didn't recognize, looking comfortable and intimate in a way that spoke of a long-established relationship. "How long?" I whispered, unable to look up from the phone. 8 months, Victoria replied, her voice thick with emotion. "It started during the quarterly planning retreat in San Antonio. We'd both had too much to wine at dinner, and we were talking about the stress of our jobs, and one thing led to another. It was supposed to be a one-time mistake, but then it just kept happening." I finally raised my eyes to meet hers, and I saw my own pain reflected back at me. "You love him." It wasn't a question, and she didn't deny it. I thought I did. I thought he loved me too. "But, Jessica, I think we've both been played. Those business trips he's been taking, the ones where he said he was meeting with clients in Dallas and San Antonio, I never authorized those trips. He wasn't working for the company during most of them." The living room started to feel too small, too airless. I sank into the armchair across from the sofa, Victoria's phone still clutched in my hand. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I think Marcus has been lying to both of us. The resignation email came with a forwarding address in Colorado. Colorado, Jessica. He never mentioned Colorado to me, not once. And when I tried calling him after reading it, his number was disconnected. I thought about all those mysterious trips, all those last-minute client emergencies that had kept Marcus away from home. If he wasn't with Victoria and he wasn't working, where had he been? And what had he been doing? There's more, Victoria continued, pulling a folder from her briefcase. I started going through his employment records after I got the resignation. Marcus has been falsifying his expense reports for months, charging the company for hotels and flights that don't match up with any authorized business travel. I estimate he's stolen close to $30,000 in fraudulent expense reimbursements. The number hit me like a slap. $30,000. That explained some things. The expensive gifts he'd been bringing home, the new watch he'd bought himself last month, the way he'd insisted on paying for our anniversary dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Austin, even though I'd suggested somewhere more budget-friendly. Have you called the police? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded when everything inside me felt like it was falling apart. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to warn you. Jessica, if he's been stealing from the company, if he's been running some kind of scam, you could be implicated as his wife. You need to protect yourself. I stared at her. This woman who had been sleeping with my husband for 8 months, who was now sitting in my living room trying to give me legal advice. The surreal nature of the situation would have been almost funny if it wasn't so devastating. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why not just handle it through the company, file charges and move on? Victoria looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I hadn't noticed before that she was married too, because I realized something when I read his resignation email. Marcus never intended to leave with me. All those promises about our future together, about how he was going to leave you so we could be together, they were all lies. He was playing both of us, keeping both of us on the hook while he planned whatever this is. She was right, of course. I could see it now with horrible clarity. Marcus had been telling Victoria that he was planning to leave me, while telling me that his increased travel was just a temporary work situation. He'd been using our marriage as cover for his affair, while using the affair as cover for his real activities, whatever those were. The house, I said suddenly, a new fear gripping me. Our joint accounts. What if he's been stealing from me too? Victoria's expression grew even more grim. You need to check everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, any investments or assets you have together, and you need to do it now. I pulled out my own phone with shaking fingers and opened my banking app. Our joint checking account, the one we used for household expenses, showed a balance of just over $3,000. That seemed normal. But when I checked our joint savings account, the one where we'd been building our emergency fund, my blood ran cold. The account was empty, completely empty. $47,000, gone. Oh, God, I whispered, staring at the screen. Victoria, he cleaned out our savings. Everything we've saved for the past 4 years, it's gone. She moved to sit beside me on the arm of my chair, looking at my phone screen over my shoulder. When was the last transfer? I scrolled through the transaction history, my heart sinking with each entry. Yesterday. He moved it all yesterday while I was supposed to be in Houston. Multiple transfers to an account I don't recognize. The room spun slightly, and I had to close my eyes and focus on breathing. Marcus hadn't just left me. He hadn't just been having an affair. He had systematically stolen our life savings and disappeared. The man I'd been married to for 4 years, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, was a thief. I'm so sorry, Victoria said quietly. Jessica, I'm so incredibly sorry. For the affair, for not seeing what he was really doing, for all of it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I opened my eyes and looked at her. This woman who was also one of Marcus's victims, even if she'd been a willing participant in the affair. She looked as devastated as I felt, and despite everything, I found myself feeling a strange kinship with her. We need to figure out what he was really doing, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. All those trips, all those lies. There has to be a pattern. There has to be a way to trace where he went and what he was planning. Victoria nodded. I've been thinking the same thing. I brought copies of all his expense reports, his travel requests, everything I could find in his personnel file. Maybe if we put it all together, we can figure out where he is and how to get him arrested. As we spread the documents across my coffee table, I felt something shift inside me. The initial shock and devastation were still there, but underneath, something harder was taking shape. Anger, determination, a refusal to let Marcus destroy my life without consequences. I might have been blindsided by his betrayal, but I wasn't helpless. I had resources, skills, and now, unexpectedly, an ally in Victoria. Marcus might have thought he could disappear with our money and leave us both behind to pick up the pieces. But he was about to learn that he'd seriously underestimated the women he'd betrayed. The documents Victoria had brought painted a picture of a man who'd been planning his escape for months. Expense reports for hotels in cities he'd never mentioned visiting. Receipts for rental cars when he'd claimed to be flying. Meal charges for 2 people when he was supposedly traveling alone for business. Look at this pattern, I said, pointing to a series of reports from the past 3 months. He's been going to Colorado regularly. Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins. That has to be where he is now. Victoria leaned over the table, studying the papers. But why Colorado? Does he have family there? Friends? I shook my head. Not that I know of. But then again, apparently there's a lot I didn't know about my husband. As we worked through the documents, cross-referencing dates and locations, I found myself thinking about Emma, Marcus's 15-year-old daughter from his first marriage. She lived with her mother in San Antonio, but Marcus had custody every other weekend, or at least he was supposed to. I realize now that he'd been canceling those visits more and more frequently over the past few months, claiming work obligations. Victoria, I said slowly, when was the last time Marcus actually showed up for work? I mean, physically showed up at the office? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her calendar. 3 weeks ago. He's been working remotely, claiming he was more productive at home without office distractions. 3 weeks. That meant he'd been gone for 3 weeks, and I'd been so busy with my own work that I hadn't realized how little I'd actually seen him during that time. He'd been sleeping in our guest room, claiming he didn't want to wake me with his early client calls. He'd been leaving before I got up and coming home after I went to bed. I'd been living with a ghost, and I hadn't even noticed. My phone buzzed with a text message, and for a split second, my heart leaped with the ridiculous hope that it might be Marcus with some explanation that would make all of this make sense. But the message was from Tyler, my best friend from college, who now worked as a graphic designer here in Austin. Hey girl, just saw Marcus at the airport with some woman. Thought you were out of town? Everything okay? I showed the message to Victoria, and we stared at each other in stunned silence. The airport, Victoria whispered. He's running. Really, running. I called Tyler immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Jess? What's going on? I tried to wave at Marcus, but he didn't see me. He was in a pretty big hurry. Tyler, what woman? What did she look like? Blonde? Maybe 40-ish? They seem to know each other pretty well. Jess, you're scaring me. What's happening? I explained the situation as briefly as I could, watching Victoria's face grow paler with each detail I shared. When I finished, Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Jess. I'm so sorry. Listen, I'm coming over right now. Don't do anything crazy until I get there, okay? After I hung up, Victoria and I sat in silence, the weight of our situation settling over us. Marcus was gone, probably forever. He'd stolen money from both his wife and his employer. He'd been planning this escape for months while lying to everyone who trusted him. And now he was at the airport with another woman, ready to start anew. Life somewhere else with money that didn't belong to him. "We have to call the police," Victoria said finally. "This is theft, fraud, maybe more. We can't handle this on our own." I nodded, knowing she was right, but feeling overwhelmed by the thought of trying to explain this entire mess to strangers. How do you tell police officers that your husband has been living a triple life? How do you prove that someone you trusted completely has been systematically destroying your life while pretending to love you? But as I looked around my living room, at the home Marcus and I had built together, at the photos on the mantle showing our happy moments that now felt like elaborate lies, I felt my resolve strengthen. Marcus might have planned this betrayal carefully, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He'd assumed I would be too devastated, too confused, too helpless to fight back effectively. He'd counted on me being the trusting, naive wife who would quietly accept her fate and move on. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Tyler arrived at my house 20 minutes later, bursting through the front door with the energy of someone ready for battle. My best friend since college had always been protective of me, but seeing him take in the scene, Victoria still sitting in my living room surrounded by financial documents, and both of us looking like we'd been hit by a truck, brought out a fierce loyalty I'd forgotten he possessed. "Okay, somebody needs to explain to me how we're going to destroy this bastard," he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from us. "Because I've known you for 10 years, Jessica, and I've never seen you look this wrecked, so we're going to fix this." I found myself almost smiling despite everything. Tyler had a way of cutting through emotional chaos and focusing on practical solutions that I'd always admired. It's what made him such a good graphic designer and an even better friend. "Tyler, this is Victoria Chen, Marcus's boss," I said, gesturing between them. "Victoria, this is Tyler Brooks, my best friend and the person who just spotted Marcus at the airport." Victoria extended her hand professionally. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Yeah, well, circumstances have a way of revealing people's true character," Tyler replied, shaking her hand but keeping his attention focused on me. "So what do we know, and what do we need to find out?" I filled him in on everything we'd discovered so far, watching his expression grow darker with each revelation. When I got to the part about our emptied savings account, he actually swore under his breath. $47,000, he repeated. "Jessica, that's not just theft. That's carefully planned financial fraud. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision to run away with his mistress. He's been setting this up for months." Victoria cleared her throat. "Actually, I don't think I'm the mistress in this scenario. I think we're both victims of whatever long-term plan Marcus has been running." Tyler studied her for a moment, and I could see him processing the dynamics of our unusual alliance. "You said he was at the airport with another woman. Blonde, 40-ish. That wasn't you?" "Definitely not me," Victoria confirmed. "I was here crying in Jessica's living room when Marcus was supposedly catching a flight to God knows where." "So, there's a third woman," I said, the reality of it hitting me like a fresh blow. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me with Victoria. He was cheating on both of us with someone else. Tyler pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. "What airline terminal did I see him at?" "I was picking up a client, so I was at the main terminal. Southwest, I think. Give me a minute." While Tyler worked his phone, Victoria and I continued sorting through the expense reports and travel documents. A pattern was emerging that made my stomach turn with each new discovery. "Look at this," Victoria said, spreading out several receipts across the coffee table. "These hotel charges from Denver. They're all for 2 people, but they're spread across 3 different credit cards. One corporate card from my company, one that looks like a personal card, and one I don't recognize." I leaned over to examine the receipts more closely. The dates corresponded with trips Marcus had told me were solo business meetings. But the charges clearly indicated he'd been traveling with someone. Someone who wasn't Victoria. He's been juggling multiple relationships, I realized. You, me, and at least one other woman. Probably more. Tyler looked up from his phone with a grim expression. I've got bad news and worse news. The bad news is that there were 3 flights leaving Austin around the time I saw Marcus. Denver, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. The worst news is that I managed to get a photo. He turned his phone toward us, and I found myself staring at a grainy but unmistakable image of Marcus standing in an airport security line with a woman I'd never seen before. She was blonde, as Tyler had described, but younger than I'd expected. Maybe early 30s, with an expensive-looking carry-on bag and the kind of confident posture that suggested she was used to first-class treatment. Do either of you recognize her? Tyler asked. Victoria and I both shook our heads. Another stranger in Marcus's secret life. Tyler, can you send that photo to me? I asked. We might need it for evidence. As he forwarded the image, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my bank's customer service number, and my heart immediately jumped into my throat. Mrs. Martinez? This is Janet from First National Bank. We've detected some unusual activity on your accounts and wanted to verify some recent transactions. I put the phone on speaker so Victoria and Tyler could hear. What kind of unusual activity? Several. Large transfers were initiated yesterday from your joint savings account. The transfers appear to be authorized with the correct security information, but the amounts and destinations flagged our fraud detection system. Can you confirm that you authorized transfers totaling $47,000 to an account at Colorado Mountain Credit Union? Victoria and I exchanged looks. Colorado again. No, I said firmly. I did not authorize those transfers. Those transactions are fraudulent. I understand, Mrs. Martinez. We'll need you to come in to file a formal fraud report and provide documentation. In the meantime, we're freezing all your joint accounts to prevent any additional unauthorized access. After I hung up, Tyler leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. Colorado Mountain Credit Union. That's pretty specific. If Marcus opened an account there, he had to provide identification and documentation. There'll be a paper trail. But how do we access it? Victoria asked. We can't just call a bank in Colorado and ask for information about someone else's account? No, but we can file police reports, I said, feeling something clicking into place in my mind. Theft, fraud, embezzlement. Once there's an official investigation, law enforcement can request that information. Tyler nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like someone who's going to win this fight instead of just surviving it. His words resonated with something deep inside me. For the past few hours, I'd been reacting to Marcus's betrayal, trying to process the emotional devastation while scrambling to understand the scope of his deception. But Tyler was right. I needed to stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like someone who was going to hold Marcus accountable for what he'd done. Victoria, you mentioned earlier that you estimate Marcus stole about $30,000 from your company through fraudulent expense reports. Do you have documentation of that? Every receipt, every falsified report, every unauthorized charge, she confirmed. I started pulling it all together after I got his resignation email this morning. Good. We'll need that for the police report. Tyler, can you think of anyone else who might have information about Marcus's activities? Anyone who might have seen him with this mystery woman or noticed unusual behavior? Tyler considered this. Well, Marcus played poker with a group of guys every month. I met some of them at your housewarming party a couple years ago. They might know something. I remembered the poker games. Marcus had been going to them for years, claiming they were just a casual group of friends getting together to blow off steam. But now I wondered if those nights had been cover for other activities. Do you have contact information for any of them? I think I have Jake Morrison's number. He's a real estate agent here in Austin. Nice guy. Seemed pretty straightforward. While Tyler searched for Jake's contact information, Victoria was studying the expense reports with renewed focus. "Jessica, I think I found something important," she said. "These hotel charges in Denver aren't just for the same hotel. They're for the same room. Room 847 at the downtown Marriott. Marcus has been staying in the same room for multiple trips over the past 6 months." "That's weird," Tyler observed. "Why would someone request the same hotel room unless they had a specific reason?" A chill ran down my spine as a possibility occurred to me. What if it's not just a hotel room? What if Marcus has been using it as a permanent residence, like a second home? Victoria's eyes widened. Corporate housing. Some companies arrange long-term stays for employees who travel frequently to the same location. But Marcus's company doesn't have any clients in Denver that would justify that kind of arrangement. So he's been paying for his own long-term residence in Denver while pretending to be on business trips, I concluded, using stolen money to fund a secret life in another state. The scope of Marcus's deception was staggering. This wasn't just an affair or even a simple theft. He'd been constructing an entirely separate existence, complete with a home base in another state and relationships with multiple women who probably didn't know about each other. Tyler found Jake Morrison's number and called him while Victoria and I continued analyzing the financial documents. I could hear Jake's side of the why conversation faintly, and Tyler's expression grew increasingly serious as they talked. "Jake, thanks for taking my call. I'm calling about Marcus Martinez. I know you guys played poker together regularly." "Yeah, Jessica's friend Tyler." "Listen, this is going to sound strange, but when was the last time Marcus showed up for poker night?" Tyler listened for a moment, then asked, "Did he say anything about traveling more for work? Or mention anything about Colorado?" "Really? Are you sure about that?" "Okay, thanks, Jake. I appreciate it." When Tyler hung up, he looked troubled. "Jake says Marcus hasn't been to poker night in over 2 months. The last time he showed up, he was acting strange. Distracted, checking his phone constantly, and he left early claiming he had an emergency work call. But here's the weird part. Jake says Marcus mentioned he was thinking about relocating to Colorado for a business opportunity. 2 months ago," I repeated. "That's right around the time the hotel charges in Denver started becoming regular." Victoria pulled out her laptop and opened it on the coffee table. "I want to check something. If Marcus has been using company resources to support a secret life in Colorado, there might be other evidence in his digital footprint." She logged into her company's employee portal and navigated to Marcus's account information. "I have administrative access to all employee records as CEO. Let me see what Marcus has been doing online during work hours." As Victoria scrolled through Marcus's digital activity logs, I found myself thinking about all the signs I'd missed or dismissed. The way he'd become secretive about his phone, taking calls in other rooms and keeping his screen face down on tables. The expensive gifts that had seemed thoughtful at the time but now felt like guilt offerings. The gradual emotional distance that I'd attributed to work stress. "This is interesting," Victoria said, pointing to her laptop screen. "Marcus has been accessing real estate websites during work hours, specifically rental properties in the Denver area. And look at this. He's been researching Colorado divorce laws." The words hit me like a physical blow. Divorce laws. Marcus hadn't just been planning to disappear with our money. He'd been researching how to legally dissolve our marriage from another state. "When was he looking at this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The searches date back 4 months," Victoria replied. "Jessica, I think Marcus has been planning to divorce you for months, but he wanted to drain your assets first." Tyler leaned forward, his expression fierce. "That's not just theft. That's systematic financial abuse. He's been deliberately positioning himself to take everything while leaving you with nothing." The room felt too small again, and I had to focus on breathing steadily. 4 months ago, Marcus and I had been talking about starting a family. We'd been planning a vacation to Europe for our anniversary. I'd been completely oblivious to the fact that my husband was researching how to leave me while stealing everything we'd built together. "There's more," Victoria continued, scrolling through additional search history. "He's been looking at identity change services, companies that help people establish new identities in different states." "Identity change?" Tyler asked. "Like witness protection?" "More like people who want to disappear and start over with a clean slate," Victoria explained. "There are legitimate services for people escaping domestic violence or stalking situations, but they can also be used by people who want to avoid legal consequences for their actions." I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our backyard. The garden Marcus and I had planted together last spring was thriving, full of tomatoes and herbs and flowers we'd chosen together. It felt surreal to be looking at evidence of our shared life while discovering that he'd been planning to erase that life entirely. "We need to move faster," I said, turning back to Victoria and Tyler. "If Marcus has been planning this for months, if he's researching identity changes and divorce laws, then he's not just running away. He's trying to disappear completely. Once he establishes a new identity, it'll be much harder to track him down or recover the money." Victoria nodded grimly. "The police report needs to happen today, and we need to contact the FBI. Interstate. Fraud, multiple victims, stolen identities. This is way beyond local police jurisdiction." Tyler was already pulling up contact information on his phone. "I know someone who might be able to help. Amanda Rodriguez. She's a private investigator who specializes in financial crimes. We dated briefly a couple years ago, but we stayed friends. She's good at her job, and she's not afraid to bend rules when the situation calls for it." "A private investigator," I repeated. "Can we afford that?" "Jessica, you can't afford not to hire one," Tyler replied. "The police are going to be thorough, but they're also going to be slow. A private investigator can move faster, follow leads that might not be priority for law enforcement." He was right, of course. While I was grateful that Victoria had brought this situation to my attention, while I was determined to see Marcus face consequences for his actions, I was also acutely aware that time was working against us. Every hour that passed was another hour for Marcus to establish himself in Colorado, to solidify whatever new identity he was creating, to make it harder for anyone to find him. "Call Amanda," I decided. "Set up a meeting for this afternoon if possible." While Tyler made the call, Victoria and I continued combing through Marcus's digital trail. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been living multiple lives with careful precision. His work computer showed research into Colorado, business opportunities, apartment rentals, even enrollment in community college courses under what appeared to be an assumed name. "Christopher Morgan," Victoria read from one of the search histories. "He's been using the name Christopher Morgan for college enrollment applications." "Christopher Morgan," I repeated. "Has he been using that identity for other things?" Victoria continued searching through the browser history. "Yes, job applications, apartment applications, even dating profiles." Dating profiles. Of course there were dating profiles. "Can you access them?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to see what Marcus had been telling other women about himself. Victoria hesitated. "Are you sure you want to see this?" "It's going to be painful. I need to see it, all of it. If I'm going to fight this, I need to understand exactly what I'm fighting." She navigated to several dating websites and found profiles for Christopher Morgan that featured photos of Marcus I'd never seen before. Professional headshots that must have been taken recently, showing him in expensive suits I didn't recognize. The biographical information made my stomach turn. According to his dating profiles, Christopher Morgan was a successful independent business consultant, recently divorced, looking for a serious relationship with an intelligent, financially stable woman. His interests included travel, fine dining, and outdoor activities. He described himself as honest, loyal, and ready to commit to the right person. The lies were so complete, so convincing, that I found myself almost admiring the construction, even as it devastated me. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been creating an entirely fictional version of himself to present to other women, a version that borrowed elements of our real life while erasing my existence entirely. "Look at the activity on these profiles," Victoria said quietly. "He's been communicating with dozens of women over the past 6 months." I leaned over her shoulder to read the message histories that were still logged into Marcus's accounts. Conversations with women in Denver, Colorado Springs, even some in Phoenix and Las Vegas. All of them following similar patterns, with Marcus presenting himself as a successful businessman looking for love while carefully probing their financial situations. He's been running the same scam on multiple women, I realized. Victoria, you and I weren't just victims of his betrayal. We were part of a systematic pattern of targeting women with financial resources. Tyler finished his call with Amanda and rejoined our conversation. Amanda can meet us this afternoon at her office downtown. She says this sounds like a case she's seen before, where men create elaborate false identities to defraud multiple women simultaneously. "Multiple women," Victoria repeated. "Tyler, when you saw Marcus at the airport, you said he was with a blonde woman. Based on these dating profiles, I think we need to consider that she might be another victim, not an accomplice." The thought hadn't occurred to me, but as I considered it, the possibility made horrible sense. What if the woman Tyler had photographed was just another target of Marcus's scheme? Another woman who thought she was in love with Christopher Morgan, successful business consultant who had convinced her to help him relocate to start their new life together. "If that's true," I said slowly, "then she's probably funding their trip with her own money, thinking she's investing in their future together." "Which means she has no idea she's helping a thief escape justice," Tyler finished. Victoria was still scrolling through the dating profiles, her expression growing more troubled with each conversation thread she reviewed. "Jessica, some of these women he's been talking to, they mentioned sending him money," I asked. Amanda's fingers flew across her tablet, accessing various financial databases and cross-referencing accounts. "I can't get into her personal banking records without a court order, but I can see some public financial activity. She took out a personal loan 6 weeks ago for $50,000. $50,000. Combined with everything else Marcus had stolen and scammed, we were looking at well over $200,000 in fraudulent activity." "There's something else?" Amanda said, her expression growing more serious. "Christopher Morgan has been researching international banking laws, specifically countries with limited extradition treaties with the United States." Tyler leaned forward. "He's not just planning to disappear within the United States. He's planning to leave the country entirely." "With Sarah's money," I added. "She probably thinks they're planning some romantic international adventure together." Amanda showed us search histories that detailed research into Brazilian and Costa Rican banking systems, visa requirements for American citizens, and even property investments in countries that offered residency in exchange for financial investment. "This is why he's been moving so fast," Victoria realized. "Marcus isn't just running from his crimes, he's trying to get out of the country before anyone realizes what he's done." The scope of Marcus's plans was staggering, but what struck me most was the level of calculation involved. He hadn't just betrayed me on an emotional level or stolen money impulsively. He'd been systematically planning an exit strategy that would take him beyond the reach of American law enforcement while funding his escape with money stolen from multiple women who trusted him. "How much time do we have?" I asked Amanda. Based on what Tyler observed at the airport and the timeline of Marcus's activities, I'd estimate we have maybe 48 to 72 hours before he attempts to leave the country. If he's flying to Denver first, he'll probably need a day or two to convince Sarah to liquidate additional assets or make final preparations. Amanda pulled up flight tracking information on her computer. "Tyler, You said you saw Marcus at the Southwest Terminal around 2 o'clock yesterday. There were 3 flights departing around that time to Denver, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. Let me check passenger manifests. While Amanda worked her contacts to access airline information, Victoria, and I continued examining the evidence we'd compiled. The pattern of Marcus's crimes was becoming clearer, but so was the urgency of stopping him before he could escape accountability entirely. Jessica, there's something we need to discuss, Victoria said quietly. If Marcus succeeds in leaving the country with all this money, you might never recover your savings. Even if he's eventually caught and prosecuted, getting money back from foreign accounts can take years or might be impossible entirely. I understood what she was saying. This wasn't just about justice or closure anymore. This was about my financial survival. Marcus had stolen everything I'd saved over the past 4 years. Money I'd planned to use for a house down payment, for starting a family, for building a secure future. If he disappeared with it, I'd be starting over from nothing at 32 years old. Amanda, what are our options for stopping him before he leaves the country? I asked. Several possibilities, but they all require moving fast. We can file emergency motions to freeze his accounts, but only if we can prove he's planning to flee. We can alert federal authorities to flag his passport, but again, we need compelling evidence of criminal activity. Or we can try to track him down directly and confront him before he has a chance to escape. Tyler looked up from his phone where he'd been taking notes. What about Sarah? If she's funding his escape, she deserves to know what she's actually involved in. That's risky, Victoria warned. If we contact Sarah and she warns Marcus that we're onto him, he might accelerate his timeline or change his plans entirely. But if we don't warn her, she's going to lose $50,000 and possibly more, I countered. She's as much a victim as we are. Amanda considered our options. There's a way to approach this that might give us the best chance of success. We contact Sarah, but we do it strategically. Instead of just telling her that Marcus is a fraud, we provide her with specific evidence and ask her to help us catch him. You mean like a sting operation? Tyler asked. Exactly. If Sarah agrees to cooperate, she could help us gather evidence of Marcus's criminal activity while he's in Denver. She could record conversations, document any requests for money, even help us track his movements. The idea had merit, but it also felt dangerous. We'd be asking a woman who thought she was in love to help us destroy the man she trusted. Even with evidence of Marcus's deception, there was no guarantee Sarah would believe us or agree to help. What if she refuses? Victoria asked. What if she's so emotionally invested that she can't accept the truth about Marcus? Then we pursue other options, Amanda replied. But Sarah Chen is a software engineer with a technical background. She's likely to be analytical and evidence-based in her thinking. If we present the facts clearly and demonstrate that Marcus has been defrauding multiple women, she might be willing to help stop him. Amanda's phone rang, interrupting our strategy discussion. She answered it with a professional greeting, then listened intently for several minutes before hanging up. That was my contact at Southwest Airlines, she said. Marcus Martinez was on the passenger manifest for the 2:15 flight to Denver yesterday. He was traveling with a female passenger listed as Rachel Thompson. Rachel Thompson, I repeated. Not Sarah Chen. No, which suggests there's yet another woman involved in this situation. Either Rachel Thompson is another victim, or she's an accomplice we haven't identified yet. Tyler pulled out his phone and showed us the photo he'd taken at the airport. This is the woman I saw with Marcus. Blonde, early 30s, expensive luggage. Amanda studied the photo. I can run facial recognition software to try to identify her, but it'll take some time. In the meantime, we need to decide how to proceed. Victoria had been quiet during our discussion, but now she spoke up with a determined expression. I think we should contact Sarah Chen directly. If Marcus is in Denver with another woman, Sarah deserves to know. And if she's being defrauded, like the rest of us, she deserves the chance to protect herself. I agree, I said. But we need to be smart about how we approach her. If we just call her up and say her boyfriend is a criminal, she's going to think we're crazy. Amanda nodded. I have experience with this kind of situation. The key is to provide enough verifiable evidence up front that she can't dismiss our claims as jealousy or revenge. We lead with facts she can independently verify, then gradually reveal the scope of Marcus's deception. She pulled up Sarah's professional profile on LinkedIn. Sarah Chen, senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions. She's been with the company for 6 years, graduated from University of Colorado with degrees in computer science and mathematics. This is someone who values logic and evidence. What about her social media? Tyler asked. If Marcus has been using the same romantic playbook with her that he used with Jessica, there might be posts that reveal his patterns. Amanda accessed Sarah's various social media accounts, and what we found confirmed our suspicions. Photos from restaurants where Marcus had claimed to be having business dinners. Weekend trips to locations that corresponded with his supposed work travel. Even gifts that looked suspiciously similar to ones he'd given me during our relationship. He's been running the exact same relationship template with Sarah that he used with me, I observed. Same restaurants, same weekend destinations, even some of the same gifts. Which gives us a way to prove our claims, Victoria noted. If we can show Sarah evidence that Marcus has been giving multiple women identical experiences, she'll have to acknowledge that something isn't right. Amanda began compiling a presentation that combined evidence from Marcus's corporate expense reports, his dating profiles, the financial theft documentation, and the social media cross-references. The result was a compelling case that Marcus had been systematically defrauding multiple women while constructing false identities to support his criminal activities. This is solid evidence, Amanda concluded. Even someone emotionally invested in Marcus would have difficulty dismissing this level of documentation. How do we contact Sarah? I asked. We can't just show up at her workplace or her home. That would be too threatening. Professional networking approach, Amanda suggested. We reach out through LinkedIn with a message that acknowledges her technical background and asks for her help with a cybercrime investigation. We frame it as asking for her expertise rather than delivering bad news about her boyfriend. Tyler was scrolling through Sarah's Instagram posts, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Guys, we might have less time than we thought. Sarah posted something this morning about taking a sabbatical from work to travel with her partner. If Marcus is convincing her to quit her job, he's probably planning to leave the country very soon. How soon? Victoria asked. Tyler showed us the post. She says they're leaving for South America next week for an extended adventure. If Marcus is planning to disappear to a non-extradition country, next week might be his target timeline. The urgency of our situation crystallized with this new information. Marcus wasn't just planning to flee the country eventually. He was planning to do it within days, taking Sarah and her money with him. We contact Sarah today, I decided. Whatever the risks, we can't let Marcus disappear with another woman's life savings, and we can't let him escape justice entirely. Amanda nodded approvingly. I'll craft the initial outreach message, something professional and intriguing that will get her attention without immediately triggering her defenses. As Amanda worked on the message, Victoria and I continued analyzing the evidence we'd compiled. The picture that emerged was of a criminal operation far more sophisticated than any of us had initially realized. Marcus hadn't just been unfaithful or opportunistically dishonest. He'd been running a systematic fraud scheme that targeted successful women, exploited their trust and emotions, and extracted significant financial resources while maintaining careful documentation and exit strategies. Victoria, I need to ask you something, I said quietly. The affair you had with Marcus, did he ever ask you for money? Or suggest investments or business opportunities that required your financial participation? Victoria thought carefully before answering. Not directly, but there were some things that seemed suspicious in hindsight. He mentioned several times that he was researching investment opportunities that could benefit both of us. And he did ask me to cover some of his travel expenses when he claimed the company's reimbursement system was delayed. How much money did you give him? Maybe $3,000 or $4,000 over several months. He always promised to pay me back, and I assumed it would all be sorted out through his expense reports eventually. So Victoria had also been financially exploited, though to a lesser extent than Sarah or me. Marcus's pattern was becoming even clearer. He identified women with financial resources, established emotional connections, then gradually extracted money through various justifications and promises. Amanda finished composing her message to Sarah and showed it to us before sending it. The message was professionally worded, identifying Amanda as a private investigator working on a cybercrime case involving identity theft and romance fraud, and requesting Sarah's expertise in analyzing digital evidence related to the case. This approach gives Sarah a way to engage with us without immediately feeling defensive about her relationship, Amanda explained. If she agrees to look at the evidence as a technical expert, she'll be more likely to recognize the patterns objectively. And if she doesn't respond? Tyler asked. Then we pursue more direct methods, Amanda replied. But I think she will respond. The message appeals to her professional skills and implies that she could help protect other women from becoming victims. We spent the next hour organizing all our evidence into a comprehensive package that could be shared with Sarah if she agreed to review it. Financial records, dating profiles, social media cross-references, travel documentation, everything that demonstrated the scope and systematic nature of Marcus's fraudulent activities. As we worked, my phone rang with a call from my bank. Mrs. Martinez, this is Janet again from First National. I have an update on the fraudulent transfers from your account. We've been able to trace the receiving account at Colorado Mountain Credit Union, and we've discovered some concerning information. What kind of concerning information? I asked, putting the phone on speaker. The account was opened using falsified documentation, and there have been multiple large cash withdrawals over the past 24 hours. It appears whoever opened the account has been systematically emptying it since the transfers were completed. My heart sank. Marcus was liquidating everything, converting the stolen money to cash that would be much harder to trace or recover. How much has been withdrawn? I asked. Approximately $38,000 of the $47,000 that was transferred. We're working with Colorado authorities to freeze the remaining balance, but the cash withdrawals represent a significant portion of your stolen funds. After I hung up, the room was quiet for several moments. The reality of our situation was becoming clearer and more urgent with each new piece of information. Marcus wasn't just planning to escape. He was actively converting stolen money to untraceable cash, preparing for an international disappearance that would put him beyond the reach of law enforcement and make financial recovery nearly impossible. Amanda, we need to contact Sarah today, I said with new determination. If Marcus is liquidating accounts and converting everything to cash, he's probably pressuring Sarah to do the same thing with her money. I agree, Amanda replied. I'm sending the message now. As Amanda's message disappeared into cyberspace, carrying our hope that Sarah Chen would be willing to help us stop Marcus before he could disappear entirely, I felt the weight of everything that hung in the balance. Not just my own financial recovery, but Sarah's protection, justice for all of Marcus's victims, and the possibility that we could prevent him from victimizing other women in whatever country he planned to flee to. The response to our outreach would determine whether we could stop Marcus or whether he would successfully escape with hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from women who had trusted him with their hearts and their futures. Sarah Chen's response came faster than any of us had anticipated. Within 2 hours of Amanda sending the initial message, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my heart race. Sarah had not only replied to Amanda's LinkedIn message, but had also provided her personal phone number and requested an immediate conference call. This is either very good news or very bad news, Amanda said as she dialed Sarah's number from her office phone. Someone who responds this quickly to a message about cybercrime is either deeply concerned or completely panicked. When Sarah's voice came through the speaker, it was steady but tense, with the precise diction of someone choosing their words carefully. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for contacting me. Your message mentioned identity theft and romance fraud. I need to know if this involves someone named Christopher Morgan. Amanda, Victoria, Tyler, and I exchanged looks. Sarah was already suspicious of Marcus, which meant our job might be easier than we'd anticipated. Yes, it does involve Christopher Morgan, Amanda confirmed. Sarah, I'm going to put you on speakerphone because there are several people here who have been affected by the same individual. Before we continue, I want you to know that everything we're about to share with you is documented and verifiable. I'm listening, Sarah said, though I could hear the strain in her voice. Amanda began with the basic facts, explaining that Christopher Morgan was actually Marcus Martinez, a married man from Austin who had been systematically defrauding multiple women across several states. As she spoke, I could hear Sarah's breathing become more shallow and rapid. You said he's married, Sarah interrupted. To whom? To me, I said, speaking for the first time. My name is Jessica Martinez. Marcus is my husband of 4 years, and yesterday I discovered he'd emptied our joint savings account and disappeared. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for almost a minute. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He told me he was divorced. He said his ex-wife had been emotionally abusive and that the divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. She paused and I could hear her taking deep breaths. We were supposed to fly to Costa Rica tomorrow. He said he'd found an amazing investment opportunity there, a resort development that would set us up for life. Sarah, Victoria said gently, I'm Victoria Chen, Marcus's former boss at his consulting firm here in Austin. He's also been embezzling money from my company while conducting this relationship with you. We estimate he's stolen over $30,000 through fraudulent expense reports. Another long silence. Then Sarah's voice, stronger now but filled with a cold anger, that I recognized because it matched my own. How much money has he taken from me? We don't know for certain, Amanda replied. But we've identified a $50,000 personal loan you took out 6 weeks ago, and there may be other financial transactions we haven't uncovered yet. $67,000, Sarah said flatly. The $50,000 loan, plus $17,000 from my personal savings that I gave him for what he called startup costs for our new life together. Her voice broke slightly. I liquidated my entire emergency fund because I trusted him. The pain in her voice was devastating because it was so familiar. I'd felt that same combination of betrayal, humiliation, and rage when I'd discovered Marcus's theft. Sarah was experiencing that same emotional devastation in real time, but she was also our best hope for stopping Marcus before he could escape entirely. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, I said carefully, but we need your help. Marcus is planning to leave the country within days, possibly tomorrow, and if he succeeds, none of us will ever recover our money or see him face justice for what he's done. What do you need me to do? Sarah asked, and the determination in her voice told me she'd made the same decision I had. She wasn't going to be a victim. She was going to fight back. Amanda took control of the conversation, outlining a plan that would require careful coordination and precise timing. Sarah would continue pretending to be unaware of Marcus's deception while secretly documenting his activities and gathering evidence of his criminal behavior. We would coordinate with law enforcement to ensure that when Marcus was arrested, the charges would stick and the evidence would be overwhelming. The key is making sure he doesn't suspect that you know the truth, Amanda explained. If Marcus realizes you're onto him, he'll disappear immediately and we'll lose our chance to stop him. I can handle that, Sarah said with grim confidence. I've been suspicious for weeks anyway. Little things that didn't add up. phone calls he'd take in another room, inconsistencies in his stories about his past. I actually hired a private investigator myself 2 days ago, but they haven't reported back yet. This was unexpected news. Sarah had been conducting her own investigation into Marcus at the same time we were discovering his crimes in Austin. "What made you suspicious?" Tyler asked. "Several things, but the biggest red flag was his reluctance to introduce me to anyone from his past. He claimed to be estranged from his family and said he'd lost touch with most of his friends after his divorce. But in 8 months together, I never met a single person who had known him before we started dating." That detail resonated with me because I realized Marcus had been doing the same thing in reverse. Over the past year, he'd been gradually isolating me from my own social circle, always having scheduling conflicts when my friends wanted to get together, suggesting that my colleagues were negative influences, encouraging me to spend more time focused on our relationship rather than maintaining outside friendships. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Christopher, or Marcus, or whatever his real name is, he's been pressuring me to liquidate my investment portfolio and convert everything to cash for our Costa Rica trip. He says the resort investment requires immediate payment in cash to secure our position." Amanda made notes as Sarah spoke. "How much money is he asking you to convert to cash?" "Everything. My retirement accounts, my stock portfolio, even the equity in my condo. He's calculated that I could raise about $250,000 if I liquidate everything, and he wants me to do it before we leave tomorrow." $250,000. Combined with everything he'd already stolen from me, Victoria, and various other women, Marcus was planning to leave the country with close to $500,000 in stolen money. "Sarah, you cannot give him that money," I said urgently. "If you liquidate your retirement accounts and home equity, you'll face massive tax penalties and you'll lose your financial security forever." "I know," Sarah replied. "That's actually what triggered my decision to hire a private investigator. The financial advice he was giving me made no sense from an investment perspective. I have a background in mathematics and computer science. I understand risk assessment and financial modeling. His resort investment opportunity was full of inconsistencies and unrealistic projections." Amanda leaned forward, speaking directly into the phone. "Sarah, we need you to record any conversations you have with Marcus about money or travel plans. Can you do that legally in Colorado?" Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording, so yes, I can legally record conversations without his knowledge. I actually already have some recordings from the past few days because I've been documenting his inconsistent stories. This was better than we could have hoped for. Sarah wasn't just another victim who needed our protection. She was an intelligent, analytical person who had already been gathering evidence of Marcus's deception and was positioned to help us build an airtight case against him. "What's our timeline?" Victoria asked. "When is Marcus expecting you to have the cash ready?" "Tonight," Sarah said. "He wants me to pick up the liquidated funds this afternoon and meet him at his hotel this evening. We're supposed to fly out tomorrow morning." Amanda immediately began coordinating with her law enforcement contacts while Tyler and Victoria worked on organizing all our evidence into a comprehensive package that could be shared with federal authorities. The plan that emerged was complex, but achievable if everything went according to schedule. Sarah would go through the motions of liquidating her assets, but instead of actually converting everything to cash, she would work with her bank to flag the transactions as potentially fraudulent. This would create a paper trail showing Marcus's intent to steal large sums of money while preventing Sarah from actually losing her life savings. Meanwhile, Amanda would coordinate with FBI financial crimes investigators to monitor Marcus's hotel and arrest him when he attempted to leave for the airport. The charges would include interstate fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, and conspiracy, with evidence provided by multiple victims across several states. "There's one more thing we need to consider," I said as the plan took shape. "Rachel Thompson, the woman who flew to Denver with Marcus yesterday. If she's another victim, she needs to be protected. If she's an accomplice, she needs to be arrested along with Marcus. Amanda nodded. I've been running background checks on Rachel Thompson, and I think she's another victim. Rachel Thompson is a real estate agent from Phoenix who's been in a relationship with someone named David Morgan for the past 4 months. Same pattern as the others: whirlwind romance, promises of a future together, and gradual requests for financial support. David Morgan, Tyler repeated. Another variation of the Christopher Morgan identity. Exactly. And based on her social media activity, Rachel thinks she and David are eloping to Costa Rica for a romantic getaway. She has no idea she's funding an escape plan for a federal fugitive. The scope of Marcus's operation was staggering. He'd been maintaining simultaneous relationships with at least 3 women under different variations of the same false identity, extracting money from each of them while planning an elaborate escape that would strand all of us in different states with financial devastation and broken hearts. How do we protect Rachel without alerting Marcus that we're on to him? Victoria asked. Amanda had been considering the same question. We'll have to coordinate Rachel's protection with the arrest. Once Marcus is in custody, we can approach Rachel directly and explain the situation. Until then, her safety depends on Marcus not realizing that his entire operation has been exposed. As we finalized the details of our plan, Sarah's voice came through the speaker with a question that surprised all of us. Jessica, can I ask you something personal? During your marriage to Marcus, did he ever talk about his childhood or his family background? Because some of the stories Christopher told me about his past seem completely fabricated now that I know he was lying about everything else. I thought carefully before answering. Marcus always claimed his parents died in a car accident when he was in college, and that he had no siblings or extended family. He said it was too painful to talk about his past, so I stopped asking questions after the first year of our relationship. That's exactly what he told me about David Morgan's background, Sarah said. Orphaned in college, no living relatives. Too painful to discuss. I'm wondering if Marcus Martinez is even his real name, or if that's just another false identity. The possibility hadn't occurred to any of us, but Sarah's observation was logical and deeply unsettling. If Marcus had been using multiple false identities with his victims, why would we assume that the name he'd used in our marriage was any more real than Christopher Morgan or David Morgan? Amanda immediately began running searches on Marcus Martinez, cross-referencing the personal information I could provide with public records and background databases. What she found confirmed Sarah's suspicions and added another layer of complexity to our investigation. There are 3 different Marcus Martinez records that could match your husband's basic demographics, Amanda reported. 1 died in military service 2 years ago. 1 is currently incarcerated in Texas for unrelated crimes, and 1 has no employment history or credit history prior to 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I repeated. That's exactly when I met Marcus. Which suggests that Marcus Martinez is also a constructed identity, probably created specifically for the purpose of targeting you, Amanda concluded. Victoria looked stunned. We don't even know his real name. This man has been living in Jessica's house, working at my company, building relationships with multiple women, and we have no idea who he actually is. The revelation transformed our understanding of Marcus's crimes from sophisticated fraud to something approaching organized criminal activity. Someone with the knowledge and resources to construct multiple false identities, establish credit histories and employment records, and maintain separate lives in different states wasn't just an opportunistic con man. This was someone with either extensive criminal experience or connections to criminal organizations that specialized in identity fraud. Amanda, this changes the scope of the investigation, I said. If Marcus isn't even his real name, there could be other victims we haven't identified yet. Women in other states who knew him under different identities. I've been thinking the same thing, Amanda replied. I'm going to contact the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force and requests that they run a nationwide search for similar patterns. Romance fraud combined with identity theft, targeting financially stable women, multiple false identities based on deceased individuals. While Amanda made her calls to federal law enforcement, Sarah continued gathering intelligence from her position in Denver. Marcus had spent the morning pressuring her to complete her financial liquidations, claiming that the Costa Rica opportunity was time-sensitive and required immediate action. "He's getting more aggressive about the money," Sarah reported during one of our hourly check-ins, "and more paranoid about security. He's insisted that we only communicate through a specific encrypted messaging app, and he wants me to leave my regular phone behind when we travel." "That's concerning," Tyler noted. "If he's becoming more security conscious, he might be aware that law enforcement is closing in." Amanda disagreed. "I think he's just being careful because he's planning to disappear permanently. Encrypted communications and burner phones are standard procedure for anyone planning to flee the country illegally." As the afternoon progressed, our coordination with federal authorities intensified. The FBI Financial Crimes Task Force had agreed to take immediate action based on the evidence we'd provided, and agents were already positioning themselves in Denver to monitor Marcus's activities and arrest him when he attempted to leave for the airport. "The arrest warrant has been issued," Amanda confirmed after speaking with the lead FBI agent. "Marcus will be charged with interstate fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence you've all provided is more than sufficient to support the charges." But even as law enforcement prepared to take Marcus into custody, new complications emerged. Sarah reported that Marcus had suddenly changed their travel plans, claiming that their original flight to Costa Rica had been canceled, and they would need to drive to a private airfield outside Denver for an alternative departure. "A private airfield," Victoria repeated. "That's not good. If he's planning to leave on a private plane, he can avoid commercial aviation security and federal monitoring." Amanda immediately contacted her FBI liaison to report the change in Marcus's plans. Within minutes, federal agents were repositioning to monitor private aviation facilities in the Denver area, but the change introduced new variables that could complicate the arrest operation. "Sarah, you cannot get in a car with Marcus," I said urgently during our emergency conference call. "If he's switching to private transportation, he might be planning to take you somewhere isolated where you can't call for help." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice tense but determined. "I've been thinking the same thing. I'm going to tell him I need to make a final bank stop to complete the cash withdrawal, and then I'll find a way to signal law enforcement." As Sarah prepared to execute the most dangerous phase of our plan, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been just 24 hours earlier. Someone who had trusted completely, who had believed that the life she'd built with her husband was real and secure. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone naive and vulnerable who had narrowly escaped a catastrophe she never saw coming. The woman I was becoming was harder, more analytical, more willing to fight for justice even when it meant taking risks. Marcus had intended to destroy my life and disappear with everything I'd worked for. Instead, his betrayal had catalyzed a transformation that was about to bring down his entire criminal operation. The final phase of our plan was about to begin, and everything we'd worked toward hung in the balance. Sarah's courage, law enforcement's coordination, and our collective determination to see Marcus face consequences for his crimes would all be tested in the next few hours. Marcus had spent months planning his escape, but he'd made one critical miscalculation. He'd underestimated the women he'd targeted, assuming they would be too devastated or too isolated to mount an effective response. He was about to learn that his victims had become his greatest adversaries, and that the empire of deception he'd built was about to collapse around him. The final showdown began at precisely 4:30 in the afternoon when Sarah sent us a coded text message indicating that Marcus had arrived at her Denver condo to collect both her and the liquidated funds. Amanda had positioned herself in a surveillance van 3 blocks away, coordinating with FBI agents who were monitoring multiple possible escape routes from the city. Victoria, Tyler, and I remained in Austin, but we were connected through secure communication channels that allowed us to follow every development in real time. "He's here." Sarah's voice came through the encrypted call, barely above a whisper. "He seems nervous, more agitated than I've ever seen him. He keeps checking his phone and looking out the windows." "That's normal behavior for someone planning a major crime," Amanda assured her through the communication link. "Stay calm, stick to the plan, and remember that federal agents are positioned within 2 minutes of your location." Sarah had prepared meticulously for this confrontation. Her condo was equipped with hidden recording devices that would capture whatever Marcus said about their travel plans or his financial activities. She'd also arranged with her bank to provide her with realistic-looking cash bundles that were actually marked bills provided by the FBI, ensuring that any money Marcus took could be traced and recovered. "Sarah, can you get him to talk about the Costa Rica investment specifically?" I asked. "We need him to make statements about the financial arrangements that will support the fraud charges." "I'll try," Sarah replied. "He's asking about the money now." Through the surveillance equipment Amanda had helped Sarah install, we could hear Marcus's voice clearly. He sounded different than I remembered, more intense and focused, with an edge of desperation that suggested he understood the risks he was taking. "Did you get everything liquidated like we discussed?" Marcus was asking. "The resort developers are expecting full payment tonight, and if we don't deliver, we'll lose the opportunity entirely." Sarah's response was perfectly calibrated to draw out more incriminating statements. "I have most of it, but I'm concerned about liquidating my retirement accounts. The tax penalties are going to be enormous, and once I withdraw that money, there's no way to reverse the decision." "Sarah, we've talked about this," Marcus replied, his voice taking on the persuasive tone I remembered from our own relationship. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The resort development is going to generate returns that will more than compensate for any short-term tax consequences. You have to trust me on this." Amanda was recording everything while federal agents positioned themselves around Sarah's building. The plan was to allow Marcus to incriminate himself as thoroughly as possible before initiating the arrest, but Sarah's safety remained the top priority. "He's showing me documents about the Costa Rica investment," Sarah reported quietly. "Brochures, financial projections, even what looks like a legal contract. It all looks professional, but I can see inconsistencies in the paperwork." "Those are probably sophisticated forgeries," Amanda noted. "Marcus has been planning this exit strategy for months, so he's had time to create convincing fake documentation." Through our communication link, we could hear Marcus becoming more insistent about the timeline for their departure. He wanted to leave for the private airfield within the hour, claiming that their flight was scheduled for 6 o'clock and they couldn't afford any delays. "Sarah, you need to stall him," I said urgently. "If he gets you to that airfield before the FBI can intercept, you'll be in serious danger." Sarah handled the pressure expertly, using her technical background to ask detailed questions about the investment projections that forced Marcus to provide increasingly elaborate explanations. Each answer he gave created additional evidence of his fraudulent scheme while buying time for law enforcement to finalize their positions. "The numbers don't add up, Chris," Sarah was saying, using the false name he'd given her. "According to these projections, the resort would need to maintain an occupancy rate of 95% year-round to generate the returns you're promising. That's unrealistic for any hospitality investment, especially in a developing market." Marcus's response revealed both his desperation and his fundamental lack of understanding about legitimate investments. "Sarah, you're overthinking this. I've done extensive research, and the developers have guaranteed these returns. Sometimes you have to take risks to achieve extraordinary rewards." Amanda motioned for us to remain quiet as she coordinated with the FBI agents who were preparing to move into position. The arrest needed to happen before Marcus could convince Sarah to leave the condo, but it also needed to occur when he was in possession of the marked bills, providing irrefutable evidence of his criminal intent. "He's getting agitated about the timing," Sarah reported. Now he's saying we need to leave immediately because there's been a change in the flight schedule. This was the moment we'd been anticipating and dreading. Marcus was trying to accelerate the timeline, probably because his criminal instincts were warning him that something wasn't right. If he managed to get Sarah out of the building, the entire operation could collapse. Sarah, tell him you need to make one final call to your bank to confirm the wire transfer details, Amanda instructed. That should give us the opening we need. Chris, I just need to call the bank one more time to verify the international wire procedures, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the stress she must have been feeling. It'll only take a minute, but I want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Marcus's response revealed how close he was to panic. There's no time for more calls, Sarah. We need to leave now, or we're going to miss our window entirely. The money will be fine, the investment is legitimate, and we can handle any banking details from Costa Rica. He's trying to get me to leave without making the call, Sarah whispered into her hidden microphone. I think he suspects something. Amanda made the decision that probably saved Sarah's life. Execute the arrest now, she told the FBI agents. Marcus is about to bolt, and Sarah's in immediate danger. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Federal agents surrounded Sarah's building while a specialized team moved through the internal stairways to her floor. Amanda coordinated the timing to ensure that Marcus would be taken into custody before he could realize what was happening. Through our communication link, we heard Sarah's doorbell ring, followed by a firm knock, and the announcement that federal agents were there to execute an arrest warrant. Marcus's reaction was immediate and telling. What the hell is going on? His voice came through clearly, filled with panic and rage. Sarah, did you call the police? What did you tell them? I don't know what's happening, Sarah replied, maintaining her cover even as federal agents entered her condo. Chris, what are you talking about? Why would the FBI be here? The arrest itself was swift and professional. Marcus was taken into custody without resistance, though the agents reported that he attempted to destroy a cell phone and several documents before being handcuffed. Sarah was safe, the marked money was recovered, and Marcus was in federal custody facing charges that would likely result in decades in prison. But the story didn't end with Marcus's arrest. As federal agents processed the evidence seized from Sarah's condo and Marcus's hotel room, a much larger criminal operation began to emerge. The documents Marcus had tried to destroy revealed connections to other individuals involved in romance fraud schemes across multiple states, suggesting that he'd been part of an organized network rather than operating independently. This is bigger than we realized, Amanda reported during our debriefing call that evening. The FBI has identified at least 12 other women who were targeted by individuals using similar methods to Marcus. We're looking at a coordinated criminal enterprise that's been operating for years. Victoria and I drove to Denver the following day to provide additional testimony to federal investigators and to meet Sarah in person. The woman we encountered was remarkably composed considering what she'd been through, but I could see in her eyes the same transformation I'd experienced myself. The naive trust that had made us vulnerable to Marcus's deception had been replaced by a harder wisdom about human nature and the importance of protecting ourselves. I keep thinking about how close I came to losing everything, Sarah told us over coffee near the FBI field office. If you hadn't reached out when you did, I would have liquidated my entire life savings and disappeared to Costa Rica with a man, whose real name I don't even know. The investigation revealed that Marcus's real name was actually Michael Robert Thompson, and he had a criminal history dating back 15 years. He'd been arrested multiple times for fraud-related offenses, but had managed to avoid serious prison time by constructing new identities and relocating to different states. The romance fraud scheme he'd been operating was just the latest evolution of a criminal career built on exploiting trust and manipulating emotions. Rachel Thompson, the woman who had flown to Denver with Marcus, turned out to be another victim who had liquidated her real estate business in Phoenix to fund what she believed was a legitimate investment opportunity. Federal agents arrested her initially as a potential accomplice, But she was released when it became clear that she'd been deceived just as thoroughly as Sarah and I had been. The financial recovery process took months to complete, but it was more successful than any of us had dared to hope. Federal authorities were able to trace and freeze accounts in multiple states and countries, recovering nearly $400,000 that Marcus and his associates had stolen from various victims. My portion of the recovery was substantial enough to replace what had been stolen from our savings account and provide additional compensation for the emotional trauma I'd experienced. Victoria's company also recovered the money Marcus had embezzled, and she used the experience to implement new security protocols that would prevent similar fraud in the future. The scandal initially threatened her position as CEO, but the board ultimately recognized that she'd been a victim rather than an accomplice and commended her for cooperating fully with the investigation. The legal proceedings against Marcus, whose real name we now knew was Michael Thompson, stretched over more than a year. Federal prosecutors charged him with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence we'd helped gather was so comprehensive that his defense attorneys eventually advised him to accept a plea agreement rather than risk a trial that would likely result in an even longer sentence. Michael was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with requirements that he pay full restitution to his victims and register as a financial offender upon his eventual release. His associates in the romance fraud network received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation with authorities. The personal healing process took much longer than the legal resolution. I went through months of therapy to process the betrayal and rebuild my ability to trust others. The experience had shattered my assumptions about love, marriage, and security in ways that couldn't be fixed simply by recovering the stolen money or seeing justice served. Tyler remained a constant source of support throughout the recovery process, and his friendship became one of the foundations on which I rebuilt my life. Amanda became not just a professional contact, but a genuine friend who helped me understand that surviving what Marcus had done to me was an achievement worth celebrating, rather than a failure to be ashamed of. Sarah and I maintained regular contact, bonding over our shared experience in ways that created a lasting friendship. She relocated to Austin 6 months after Marcus's arrest, accepting a position with a tech company that allowed her to start fresh while remaining connected to the support network we'd built together. Most surprisingly, Victoria and I developed a relationship that transcended the circumstances that had brought us together. Her guilt over the affair gradually evolved into a mutual respect for how we'd both handled an impossible situation. She became a mentor in my professional life and eventually offered me a position at her consulting firm that allowed me to specialize in financial security and fraud prevention. The experience of bringing down Marcus's criminal operation had revealed skills and strengths I didn't know I possessed. My analytical abilities, combined with the painful education I'd received about financial fraud, positioned me to help other people protect themselves from similar schemes. I began speaking at conferences about romance fraud prevention and consulting with law enforcement agencies on financial crime investigations. 2 years after Marcus's arrest, I received a call from the FBI asking for assistance with a case involving romance fraud targeting military spouses. The patterns were similar to what Marcus had used, and my expertise in analyzing financial records and victim psychology proved valuable in helping federal agents build their case. Working on that investigation led to others, and eventually to a career transition that I never could have anticipated. I left traditional marketing to establish a consulting practice focused on financial crime prevention and victim advocacy. The work was challenging and sometimes emotionally difficult, but it provided a sense of purpose that came from using my worst experience to help protect others from similar harm. The story of Marcus's betrayal became a cautionary tale that I shared with women's groups, financial advisors, and law enforcement agencies. Not the personal details of my pain and humiliation, but the patterns of behavior that had allowed him to operate undetected for so long. The warning signs that I'd missed or dismissed. The financial vulnerabilities that predators like Marcus exploited. Each time I told that story, I emphasized that intelligence, education, and professional success offered no protection against emotional manipulation by someone determined to exploit trust for financial gain. The women Marcus had targeted weren't naive or foolish. We were successful, capable people who had been systematically deceived by someone with extensive experience in criminal manipulation. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about financial security or background checks or protecting assets, though all of those things mattered. The most important lesson was about the difference between healing and justice, between survival and transformation. Marcus had intended to destroy my life and disappear with everything I'd worked for. Instead, his betrayal had catalyzed a journey that led to a stronger sense of self, meaningful work, and relationships built on genuine mutual respect rather than deception. 5 years later, as I sat in my Austin office reviewing case files for a financial crime investigation, I reflected on how completely my life had changed since that devastating day when I'd come home early to find Victoria crying in my living room. The woman I'd been then seemed like someone I'd known long ago, someone vulnerable and trusting who had learned difficult lessons about the world's capacity for cruelty. The woman I'd become was harder, but not bitter, cautious but not paranoid, independent but not isolated. I'd built a life and career founded on helping others avoid the kind of devastation Marcus had inflicted on me, and that work provided a satisfaction deeper than any relationship I'd had before his betrayal. Marcus remained in federal prison, with more than a decade left on his sentence. Occasionally, I received updates about his status through the victim notification system, but he'd become irrelevant to my daily life. The man who had once seemed like the center of my universe was now just a reminder of how much I'd grown and how far I'd traveled from the person I'd been when I trusted him completely. The house in Riverside Heights had been sold, with the proceeds, helping to fund my new business and the life I was building on my own terms. I'd moved to a smaller place downtown, closer to my office and the community of professionals who had become my chosen family. Tyler lived just a few blocks away, and Victoria remained a close friend and occasional business partner. Sarah had thrived in Austin, eventually starting her own software security firm that specialized in protecting financial institutions from the kind of fraud schemes that had targeted us. Her technical expertise, combined with her personal experience as a victim, made her uniquely qualified to develop systems that could detect and prevent romance fraud before it devastated people's lives. The network of relationships that had emerged from our shared crisis had become one of the most valuable aspects of my new life. Not just professional connections, but genuine friendships forged through adversity and mutual support. We'd all been transformed by what Marcus had done to us, but we'd transformed it into something positive that served others. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from the FBI agent I'd been working with on the military spouse fraud case. The suspect had been arrested in Florida, and the evidence we'd helped gather had resulted in charges that would likely put him in prison for 15 years. 3 women who might have lost their life savings were safe, and a criminal who preyed on the vulnerability of military families was facing justice. It was exactly the kind of outcome that made all the difficult work worthwhile. Marcus had taught me that the world contained people capable of extraordinary cruelty and deception, but the years since his arrest had shown me that it also contained people capable of remarkable courage, resilience, and dedication to protecting others from harm. The betrayal that had once felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of a life more meaningful than any I could have imagined when I was married to someone whose real name I didn't even know. Marcus had intended to destroy me, but instead he'd revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed and led me toward a purpose I never would have discovered otherwise. As I locked my office and headed home through the Austin evening, I smiled at the thought of how wrong Marcus had been about me, about Sarah, about Victoria, about all the women he'd tried to reduce to financial resources. We'd been so much stronger than he'd realized, and that strength had ultimately been his downfall. The story of our victory over his deception had become a foundation for helping others write different endings to their own encounters with financial predators. And that, I realized, was the best possible outcome from the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.